Okay, so good afternoon everyone. Welcome. Happy New Year. So welcome to this course in Foundations in Practical Indian Philosophy, which I'm going to record. So today we're basically going to start yoga, what, when, where, who, how and why. We're going to kind of take up those questions. Have you all met?
No.
So I'm James.
Madhu.
Madhu.
Alexia or Alex, that's easier. Annie. And Megan. Patricia. Nayeli.
Paul. Chris.
Katya.
Okay, so welcome everyone. So when we start studying yoga, what does yoga mean? Union, yeah? What, any other words that sometimes get used? Okay, so a definition from the Yoga Sutra, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which we could also spend the whole class today talking about. Any other words? So other words that maybe, like, so we've had union, harmony, balance, joining, connecting,
Yoke.
to yoke. Now, this word, when you say the word yoke, Chris, what do you mean?
Connecting is
Yeah.
a good synonym, I guess, but to kind of harness.
So this word yoke is not such a common word in English, but like Chris says, there's something a little bit special about that word compared to connect or join, that it has this connotation or this idea of when you join to it, and then it allows those things that were separate to move together. So it's not just any old connection. We could say yoga is a connection that helps the parts that were previously perhaps not so joined to function as a whole, or to function as a unit. Does that make sense? So the word yoke, I don't think I'd ever used it in, some people, if you have a donkey and a cart, you might use this word in your general day-to-day vocabulary, but it's not such a common word. But it does have that particular association. Joining, but for the sake of allowing two things that were previously separate to move together. And another connotation of yoke is, what do you generally yoke? I mentioned a donkey, but here we are in South India.
Cows.
You have a cow or a bullock.
Two.
Oh, two.
Yoke them together.
And you yoke them to
A cart.
a cart. For the sake of. What do you put on the cart?
Moving material.
Yeah, so you want to move a lot of heavy stuff from one place to another. And so the idea in yoga is that when we gather, when we join all our parts, we can maybe move in a different way. We can move in a more, let's say, efficient way. Does that make sense? But if we come to this basic idea of union, or connecting or joining, what's the question that then asks? If we're union or joining what? Unifying what?
Mind, body.
So this is often what we hear of, certainly in the modern situation. People talk about joining mind and body. Yeah? But it's interesting, in the traditional Indian system, the mind and the body are not separate. So one thing that we'll emphasize it quite a lot this week, is that when we look at the yoga tradition, or teachings of yoga, in texts like the Yoga Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, in the whole pantheon of Indian mythology, we look through our contemporary eyes. And the world that we live in and have grown up in is significantly different from the world that Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras in. or Vyasa, who put the Bhagavad Gita into poetry, wrote it in. So we live, we might say, one of my friends, he's a retired US Marine captain, now in his 70s, and he says, James, you have to remember, this isn't his exact words, but something on, we are abiding in a criminal system. We are living in criminality. Because for a long time now, as a species, we have been taking what Mother Earth, what Mother Earth gives us freely and imposing a charge for it. Yeah? So we take things from the earth that the earth gives us, and then we make other people give us money for it. And we are part of this system. We might not be the most active participant in it, but how can we escape it these days? We get in the car, we get on a plane, we buy something from a supermarket. We're part of this system, which is charging money for things that nature has given freely. Does that make sense? And also, hello. In the world we live in now, welcome.
Thank you.
The world we live in now, I wasn't around when these yoga texts were first written down, but the report is that back then, the world was a bit more spacious. Apparently, at the time of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, more or less, there were fewer human beings on the entire planet than were living in the city of Mumbai at the turn of the 21st century. Or you might say, a couple of thousand years ago, there were fewer people on the entire planet than now live in any of the biggest cities in the world. So that's a big difference. And also, things have accelerated. Change has accelerated. And what this means is, our awareness has more influences bombarding it than people did back then. And so we've been exposed to many influences which all have an impact on the way we see the world and the way we see reality. Does that make sense? Now, one thing about the world we're living in, this, what I call this criminal system, we could say that we're dominated by the merchants, by those who are in commerce, yeah? Selling things. People these days seem obsessed with selling things. You know, like, anyway.
And buying. And buying.
And buying, yeah. Last year, yes, already last year, I bought a pair of shoes. So-called barefoot shoes. The idea is, you know, they don't change the way your foot interacts with the ground in the same extreme way that most shoes these days do. And the brand that designed and built these shoes, they are trying to expand. And having bought the shoes, I was sent a survey that I could fill in. And one of the questions in the survey was, which 3 brands do you most identify with? I tried to skip the question, but I couldn't. I had to put something in the box. So I said, I do not associate or identify with any particular brand. And I put it in 3 boxes. But this was a normal question for somebody to ask in the 21st century. What brand do you identify with?
What were the options?
No, there weren't options. You could just write your own. Any brand, yeah. But Patanjali wasn't interested in brands. And the people who were writing down these yogic messages, these yogic teachings, they weren't seeing the world through that type of lens. So one thing that sometimes happens nowadays is that people look at yoga and they try to fit it into their system. Now, as a human being, we cannot but look through our cumulative conditionings. But the effort we have to make when we engage with these texts is, can I look at them as free of my preconditionings as is possible? Of course, my accumulated conditions are going to influence me. But can I remember that this text is designed to speak to me across time? And so if I look at it through a very particular 21st century lens, perhaps I'm not going to let it nourish me as much as it could. Does that make sense? So, some people in the world today are trying to make yoga a business. I would suggest, can you make your business yoga? Don't try to make yoga a business. But if you live your life as yoga, it promises harmony and balance and real sustainability. But in order for us to do that, we have to make a really kind of diligent effort, because the influences that would commodify, that would make something into something that can be bought and sold, they're constantly being thrust upon us. And so as we consider yoga, my intention this week is, can we create a platform so we can work with these texts and work with these teachings in a way that is nourishing for us, in the reality of our contemporary lives, but with enough of a kind of foundation so we're not going to miss the real juice of the teachings for the sometimes deprived versions of the teachings that get propagated in business yoga. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, we've mentioned yoga is unifying or gathering or bringing together, yoking. Now, in the grand scheme of things, if we go to a published yoga book, we probably don't have to go to too many published yoga books to read the idea. Yoga is the joining of the individual soul with the supreme soul. Have you come across this idea? What do you think of this idea? How does it sound?
Great.
Sounds great, yeah. That sounds pretty cool, like to be joined with the ultimate, to be one with everything. Yes?
It sounds a little daunting to the everyday person.
And then the other thing, it can sound at first glance like, wow, but then it can sound, oof, oh, that's too much.
Next life.
That's too much for me.
Next life.
Yeah, never mind, I'll forget about it. So it can have these impacts. But the other problem that I find when I come across this definition, I don't know if it's the same for you, is joining the individual soul to the supreme soul. I have a problem here because I don't know myself and I don't know the supreme. So how can I join two things I don't know? What to do? But yoga is the practical school of Indian philosophy. So, no problem. In yoga, we just start where we are, again and again and again. Every day, we just start again where we are. And we work with what is. But I see from the smiles around the room that when I said I don't know myself and I don't know the ultimate reality, I'm not the only one in the room who feels that, yeah? Have you ever had the experience, you go to bed, feeling, saying, tomorrow I will definitely do this. And then in the morning, it's like another you wakes up, who has no particular interest in doing that which the person who went to bed yesterday was resolute about. Have you experienced this? Has anybody never experienced this? Have you ever done something that you know you don't really want to do, but you just did it anyway? Yeah. It happens quite a lot, too. So what does this tell us?
Disconnected?
Somehow we're not quite we're not unified here. So if we want unification there, well, let's start here. Yeah? So I find it curious and interesting. I know some of you are native English speakers, but some of you are not. So I have a question for you. If I ask the question, what is the most famous and celebrated drama or play in the English language, what answer would you give?
Shakespeare.
And which play?
Romeo and Juliet.
Okay. Another contender for most popular.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yes, there are a few, but I think there's one that they say is always being produced somewhere in the world.
Hamlet.
Hamlet. You know Hamlet? Who is Hamlet? What is his defining characteristic? To be or not to be? He is split, yeah? He doesn't know what to do. Sometimes he feels very clear, this is what I've got to do, but then he just can't do it. And this play has been perennially popular for now 400 years. We can't get enough of it as human beings. Why? Because it's a great story. Why is it? And it's a great story because we can relate to it. Yeah, we also we recognize ourselves here. Sometimes our conscience knows what to do, but somehow we can't quite manage to put that into action. And so we could say that Hamlet is a type of literature which in Sanskrit is known as Purana. Say Purana.
Purana.
And Pura means long ago, back then. But Purana basically means ancient but always fresh. So all of the yogic literature, not just the mythology which is usually mentioned by the term Purana, but you could say all of it is Purana because it's set in the ever new now. It's about now. So Hamlet is set, who knows when, but really it's set now. And this is when the yogic literature is set. I was saying to Paul, I missed Star Wars. Megan, you saw it, yeah? When was it set?
In the future.
Do you remember at the beginning of Star Wars, what does it say?
2000.
Long, long ago.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. But it's the same, it's an archetypal story, yeah? And in the original Star Wars story, we have this play, this drama between Luke Skywalker, Luke Light, and the Dark Father, Darth Vader. Between the light and the dark. It's a classic Purana. It's set, not in any particular time, it's set now, in the reality of a human life. And the idea is to reconcile the light and the dark, all of the pairs of opposites. This is yoga. To include it all, to harmonize the whole field. So the idea, Chris mentioned this idea that often we hear about yoga as connecting, joining body-mind or body-mind-spirit. But in the Indian tradition, it's said that the body and the mind, they are just different parts of the same field. So the idea is, can we unify this field? And if we can unify this field, then perhaps we can experience unity with something beyond. Yeah? But if...
Do we have to unify this field before we can connect to the supreme field?
Yes.
I think we can start to connect, but to the degree that we have done it here.
Okay.
So the idea is that this is the microcosm. In the Bhagavad Gita, this week we will speak specifically about the Bhagavad Gita, about the Yoga Sutra, and about Indian mythology, known as Purana. And these are the kind of three mutually complementary sources that we will most draw on this week. But in the Gita, there's the idea that this is the kshetra. Say kshetra. Kshetra. So kshetra means field. And Krishna says that when you become a kshetragya, when you really know the field, then you can become established in yoga. In other words, when you know all of yourself, then you can experience that greater connection. So, we've acknowledged, okay, I'm not fully connected. There are parts of myself I don't know. Would you agree? Sometimes I go to bed saying one thing, and I wake up with a different idea altogether. How is this possible? There are some parts of myself I don't know so well. Do you agree? So what to do about it? The lovely thing in yoga is that it offers us a very practical model to start exploring this reality, to start cultivating greater harmony, greater balance, greater integration here and now. And so we'll look now at this sheet, which gives us a model, if you like, of reality. So we said, what is yoga? And we mentioned words like joining and connecting. When, before we look at this more closely, when does yoga happen? Or when can yoga happen?
No.
Say it loud.
Now.
Now, yes. So now is the only time we can really do anything. So now is the time for yoga. Now, some of you may be familiar with the first word of the Yoga Sutra. What is that? Uttha. Now, uttha is one of many ways in Sanskrit of saying now. But it has several connotations. One of them is kind of and now. Now that something else has happened. And the something else that has happened is that now that I have recognized that I am not a cohesive whole, now that I have recognized that I'm not fully integrated, now yoga practice can begin. Does that make sense?
Now that I recognize that I need something, lacking something.
Yeah. Now that I know that I don't know. So in the Upanishads, which we'll also mention this week, they're an important source text for yoga. They say that those who think they know, don't know. Those who know they don't know something. So when we know we don't know, we are empowered to do something about it. Because by acknowledging that we don't know, we create space to see something new, to see something different. So we could say that yoga begins, or yoga practice begins, when we recognize that we're not in yoga. And we're not in a state of wholeness, and we could perhaps do something about it. And where does yoga happen?
Here.
Right here. So the lovely thing in yoga is you don't have to go anywhere else. Where is the Bhagavad Gita set? You know this beautiful teaching text of yoga? Where is the setting? It's quite curious. I found it very curious when I first encountered the Gita. It's set on a battlefield, yeah? And I thought this a little bit strange, because I thought, isn't yoga all about peace? So why is the teaching set on a battlefield? Does anybody have any ideas?
Has to be reconciled to start with.
Yes, so the idea is,
within.
this is the field, yeah? The kshetra, this is the battlefield. Because if I go to bed saying one thing, and I wake up saying something else, I'm not in complete peace. There are different strands within me which will pull me in different directions. Yeah? Similarly, one of the reasons why the Gita is set on the battlefield is to remind us that there is no situation which is a barrier to yoga. There is no situation that is too extreme for yoga. Because the student in the Gita, he finds himself in the most stressful situation imaginable. And in that situation, he gets given the teaching. So the idea is yoga can happen always and anywhere. No situation is a barrier to yoga. We don't have to wait to start inviting yoga. in the world that we live in, we get fed this idea that we can wait for happiness. You know the myth of future happiness? This is what the whole realm of advertising rests on, yes? You'll be happy when you get this, when you achieve that, when you arrive there. What do we know about this idea? It's a lie, yeah? But somehow it's a very appealing lie. Why is it so appealing?
Our conditioning.
Because we're in the habit of believing it. And when we're in the habit of something, it has a certain comfort to it, even if it is actually uncomfortable, if it's familiar. But why else is this idea so appealing? I can be happy when I finish that, when I achieve this, when I acquire that, when I meet that person, when I live in that place.
So they're all tangible, relatively easy, accomplishable tasks.
So we like the idea of it being, just get that and then it's done. We like it to be easy as human beings, yeah? This sometimes happens in yoga practice. People think, oh, I just do that and then I don't need to think about anything else. I just do I just get up and I meditate and then I can just don't need to think about anything. But what does meditation really mean? Think of the word. Nayeli, Patricia, I know you speak the Spanish language, so you have an advantage maybe. What does meditate literally mean? Meditar. Estar en el medio. Estar en el medio, to stand in the center. So the medistate is the state of being centered. So all our techniques, all the things we practice with, they are for the sake of facilitating the practice the rest of the time. When we do a meditation technique, guys, we're training the system to stay centered, to be able to stand in a centered way, even as we're constantly moving. Does that make sense? And what does that require to stay centered as things are always moving, as life is always moving?
Union.
It requires that constant, steady awareness. Yeah? So it's not like, oh, I'll just do my technique and then I don't need to think, I don't need to pay attention. No. It's a constant, steady effort. So there is no quick fix, really. Practice is an ongoing, constant effort. And this is how Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra defines yoga practice. So it's the long-term, unbroken, wholehearted, committed effort to foster steadiness. This is yoga practice. So on occasion, here in Mysore, I have heard people say, oh, I finished practice earlier this morning. Oh, I finished practice late. You finished practice? I would like to meet the person who has finished practice. The idea is practice is everything, yeah? But why else, coming back to this question, why else is this idea of a quick fix or this idea that happiness or realization is around the corner, why is it so appealing? What it means is it can avoid looking at what is actually really here now. And this is one of the reasons why when we practice yoga we have to have courage. You have to be a warrior. This week we'll also look at archetypes of the warrior and the sovereign, which come up a lot in the yoga tradition. The idea being to look at where we really are and invite greater balance, greater harmony. Is this an easy thing? What might happen if we look at ourselves and the way we are interacting with reality keenly, at one remove from the way we normally look at ourselves? What might we notice?
See flaws.
We might notice things that, well, that's not actually that great, is it? It's perhaps not surprising that I don't feel how I'd like to feel if I'm allowing myself to operate like that. Yeah? So when we see that we are, perhaps in some instances, our own enemy, how might that feel?
Painful?
Painful, yeah? It might make our stomach turn. So we can look and say, I'll just do that, and then everything will be okay. So the world that we're living in, again and again and again, is encouraging us away from yoga practice, which is looking at grounded reality as it is. And in the 21st century, this has been taken to a whole new level because of this new realm of virtual reality and the internet. Yes? So rather than check in with what's really happening here, now there is a constant place to escape that is actually not grounded reality. But it's kind of piling more and more opportunity to turn away from what is into, what might be nice. Does that make sense? So this is the context that we're practicing in. Sometimes people say that we are living in Kali Yuga. Have you heard this term? Way back when, it was the golden age. And beings lived a long time. Everybody lived in complete harmony. But then things kind of deteriorated to the state now, it's the dark age. But they say in the yoga tradition that this is the excellent time to be practicing. Because the mainstream is flooding away from grounded reality to integration. And so if you make a steady effort, nature will really notice and give you a lot of support. And the opportunity to practice is very, very available. Because there is disharmony and deharmonizing influences all around, we don't have to look far to find advanced practice opportunities. Yeah? Have you ever seen advertised an advanced yoga workshop? Yeah? The advanced practice, so Chris was mentioning he was with Jayashree and Narasimhan earlier today. I stayed with them my first time in Mysore. I remember one time Narasimhan saying, you have to remember that asana is kindergarten. But the way I understood it, he wasn't saying asana is something trivial or like to be grown out of. Rather than, like, if you go to a good kindergarten, a good infant school, you learn the principles that will support the whole course of your learning through life. And in asana, what is asana really about? If we think of the classical definition in the Yoga Sutra, what is the classical definition of asana?
Purification.
Sthira Sukhamasana. So beautifully concise. Asana, the seat of awareness, is sthira and sukha. What do those words mean? Sthira means steady, yeah? And sukham, happy, easy. So literally the word su as a prefix always means good, agreeable, pleasing. Kam means space. Good space, easy space, pleasant space. So what do you notice? Sthira, sukha.
Opposites.
It's like an apparent pair of opposites, yeah? So asana is that place where the seeming opposites meet and draw out each other's complementary potential. And this is the whole play of yoga, is to work with all the pairs of opposites, the whole spectrum of experience, and harmonize it all, reconcile it all, include it all, and bring it all into balance. So the lovely thing about asana is it works with the body very directly. And one great thing about the body is that it doesn't lie. The mind has been known to lie. Has your mind been known to lie? Yeah? The mind can sometimes get these ideas and it can get fixed on something that make it miss reality. But the body, generally pretty reliable. If we look and pay attention, it can teach us a lot. Yeah? So yoga is an inclusive system, and it doesn't negate any part of our experience. One teaching in the Yoga of Kashmir Shaivism is that everything is consciousness. So everything can be used to invite that yoga, to invite that harmonization. So if we find ourselves in a situation, here I am, and where am I? I'm living in this world, yeah? And I'm experiencing it in this body-born vehicle. Would you agree? So yoga starts here, in this body, in this world. And so if we look at this sheet, the tattvas, this is one way that yoga describes reality. The reality within and the reality all around. And these things here, which we see listed and we'll speak about in a moment, sometimes they're called tattvas. Say tattva. And sometimes they're called gunas. Say guna. So a guna means a member of a group. And guna also means the whole group. So there's all of these as a whole, they make up the group of who we are, or the gang of who we are, we might say. Does that make sense? Like we're a gang or a group. Yeah? We've already acknowledged. Sometimes I say one thing and then I feel like doing something else. So different parts of me. And they're also known as tattvas. Now the word tat in Sanskrit, does anybody know what it means? Tat means that. So easy to remember. And tva means having the quality of. So tat, that, exists. Yeah? So tattva is that which has the quality of existing. And so here we have a map, if you like, of reality, of existence. So if we come down to the bottom of the page, yoga uses this model. This model comes from Sankhya philosophy, and Sankhya is, some say, the oldest school of Indian philosophy. It means to enumerate. And Sankhya enumerates these different evolutes of reality. And we're going to start at the bottom. And let's say these words together. Prithvi, Jala, Agni, Vayu, Akasha, Panchamahabhutaha, Panchamahabhutaha. So the Panchamahabhutaha, Panch means five in Sanskrit, so Panch, the English word, a fist with 5 fingers. Pancha, Maha, great, Bhutaha, things that have come into being. Bhu means that which has become, which exists. So we have these 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air and space. Is this true? Do you have an earthy quality? We all can acknowledge this, yeah? There is some solidity, some earth, yeah? Do we have water? Yes. When you were at school, did they tell you you were constituted of a certain percentage of water?
Yes.
What percentage did they tell you?
80.
80. In Mexico, 80, yeah. In England, 70, yeah. In the hot country, it's more fluid, yeah. But some high percentage of more than 70%, yeah.
More than 70% is 80.
Yeah. Now, I'm 40, maybe now is less than 70, because we get older and we're not quite as juicy, you know. But if we are that big percentage water, what is important if we are, this is reality, we have this watery element, what happens to water if it doesn't move? It stagnates. So what does this mean? If we have a body, what do we need to do?
Keep moving.
We need to move in lots of different ways. Do we do this in our contemporary life?
No.
So we'll come to that in more detail soon. Agni, fire. Do we have fire inside?
Yes.
how do we know we have fire?
Digestion.
Digestion. So fire, amongst many other things, is known as being the transformative element, the transformative power. Now, Paul, you spent time in London, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody been to London? Many of you have visited London. One thing that if you visit London, what is a very popular place for tourists to visit?
Big Ben.
Big Ben,
Yes.
yes. Trafalgar Square, the London Eye,
Barn.
Oxford Street.
Buckingham Palace.
I was actually thinking of Covent Garden. You know this place, Covent Garden? Covent Garden is famous for its street performers. Every day there are many street performers, and crowds will gather to watch their various shows. Now I imagine, we say, okay, today there is a yogic transformation show. And I go to the performance square in Covent Garden and say, behold, people of London and visitors from all around the world. I will now demonstrate the miraculous transformative power that is resident within all of you, because you are all human beings blessed with these miraculous transformative gifts of awareness and consciousness. Look in my left hand. And Naidi, what did you have you eaten some food today?
Yes.
What have you eaten?
Pancakes.
Pancakes. Ooh, what type of pancake?
Regular Western powder.
Okay, so you ate a pancake, yeah? Now imagine that we were to go and stand in the showground, the town square, with a pancake in our hand. And then in front of the assembled people's eyes, we were to transform this pancake into amino acids and blood cells and bone fibers and skin regeneration. What would the people say? Cool. Would they not say, God, this is a miracle? Yeah? If you were to transform the food into all these parts of your body in front of people's eyes, what would they say?
Wow.
Wow. But this is happening all the time. It's beneath the skin, but it's happening. So fire, this amazing transformative capacity, is part of us. And this is very important, because in yoga, we'll see this again as we move up through this system, is the transformative capacity is very, very important. Just because things have been a certain way up to now, does not mean they're bound to stay that way. Change is actually happening all the time. So transformation towards greater harmony is a very real thing. How else does fire show up in a human being? Anger, for example. And how else?
Movement.
Say more, Chris?
Just heat generation.
Yeah.
Through, there's something energetic and, about it, but heat produced.
Kinetic energy, yeah. So when we move, it creates heat. How else does fire show up? Digestion, anger, in that internal combustion engine that allows us to create warmth. If you feel very strongly about something.
Passion.
With passion, yes. And the desire and attachment to fire can also be there, yes. So would you all agree, yeah, I have fire inside.
Mm-hmm.
How else does water show up in our life? Here. Blood and circulation, flow of energy is water, yeah? How else? Sweating. When you're sweating, what is actually happening?
Cooling.
You're cooling, yeah? So water has this cooling quality. How else does water show up?
Purifying.
Is purifying, yeah. So for example, have you ever wept? Does it not have a kind of purifying quality to it? Yeah? A cleansing quality. What about earth? How does earth show up? Feeling grounded, yeah? This could be a nice, agreeable way that the element or the quality of earth could show up when we feel grounded, stable, easy. Sthira Sukham Asanam, there is a strong quality of earth, yeah? There's fluidity for sure, but there's also a groundedness, yeah? What about maybe not so an aspect of earthiness that we might not always choose, but sometimes it shows up?
Lethargy.
Feeling lethargy, feeling stuck, or trapped, yeah? Or blocked, yeah? What about the element of air? We have air inside, yeah? In lots of different ways. How else does air show up?
Dream.
Okay, so you go off into the airy realm, yeah? In dream. Through the breath. In the Indian tradition, air is also associated with communication, because sound travels through the air. So when the different parts of the body are communicating more cohesively, the air element is being harnessed skillfully. So when you do yogasana, for example, the idea that you ground. When you ground, you can feel element of water, flow of energy. This creates internal warmth, which creates more connectivity. That connectivity allows the different parts to communicate more agreeably, more easily. And then it invites, what's the next one? Akasha, space. Do we have space inside?
Yes.
Space around. So these elements, would you agree they're very much part of our grounded reality? So when we work with them, we can work with these to invite yoga. So, okay, I don't know myself, I don't know ultimate reality. I do know, however, that I can do things that make me feel more harmonized in my own earth element, more harmonized in my own water element, more harmonized in my own fire. Does that make sense? So we can really start to work with these. And if you have a yogasana practice, as I'm aware you all do, lovely place to start playing with, exploring the elements, to start inviting them into more and more mutually supportive balance. Then, from these 5 elements, we come to the tanmatra. These elements, they have certain qualities. So earth is said to have fragrance, gandha. Water to have sweet taste, rasa. Fire, which sense is fire associated with?
Sight.
Sight, yeah, because it's bright. Does anybody ever look at a screen? Yes, yeah. Now, back in the day, 2,000 years ago, what did people look at?
Fire.
So the fire is the old television, yeah? You look into the fire and it shows you different things. It captivates the field of vision. There's the idea as well that the looking into the fire has a very therapeutic effect on the visual cortex. An effect which isn't quite the same when you look at a fire on a screen. So fire associated with the form and things we can see. Air, which sense is air associated with?
Cooling.
We can feel it, yeah? We can feel, yes, the sense of touch. And that leaves space associated with which sense? With which type of sensory experience?
Sound.
Sound, yeah? So the idea is we can start to harmonize all of these elements by working with the senses. So we mentioned sometimes people talk about connecting the body and the mind. But the idea in yoga is, it's not just the body and the mind. There are all these powers. There are these powers of the senses, there are these powers of the body, and there are these elemental qualities. We can work with all of those things to foster this deeper harmonization. And incidentally, this is why, if we look at this list, this is why sound-based practices are so cherished in the Indian tradition. Why is that? Why is sound so venerated for yoga?
Because there's not enough space in India.
Good answer.
The vibration can affect all of the elements.
Yeah. So basically, you could say any yoga technique is about sound. It's about changing or harmonizing our vibration. So when we work with sound, we very directly start to impact all the elements. When we start to resonate or make a sound resound through our system, it will reach into all the different parts. We can be doing other techniques, but maybe some parts are not really included. Have you ever done, I know you all do a yoga asana, yeah? You know, like the plank posture? Yeah? Dandasana. So, yoga dandasana works like this one, where you make the body into a plank.
Kumbhakasana.
What's it called?
Kumbhakasana.
Kumbhakasana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dandasana.
Well, there's many danda. So a danda means a staff. Yeah. So the plank is the idea. How is a plank?
Solid.
Solid. And straight. Now, do you practice this posture?
Yes.
Some of you do. Is your plank really imbued with the spirit of plankness?
Yes.
So, if you like, we can do a little experiment now. And that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, there's 12 of us. So, Paul, can you help me?
Yeah, sure.
Paul, would you like to take plank? Yeah. So, Paul's going to inhabit plankness. So I'm going to invite Paul to fully conjure up the spirit of the plank. And as his plank helper, I'm going to help Paul find out if he's really in the spirit of plank by giving him some feedback. So, if something is not really in the spirit of plank, I can give it some extra, I can give it some extra attention. Now, once he gets more established in it, I can give more challenge. Yeah? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Was it interesting?
It was, yeah. I feel more in the spirit of plank now.
So,
Connected to inner plank.
so quickly now,
Super plank.
work with a partner, and one of you come into plank, and for about 30 seconds, the other person can give you some feedback to find out how much in the spirit of plank you are. So,
You want to go again? Happy mind?
what's that?
Happy mind plank. Yeah, happy go again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you massage, my plank will be like out.
Very good. Now switch roles.
Like yourself. I like this one. Yeah.
Oh, yes, very good. Oh, you're there. Full plank.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Was that interesting? Yeah. Did you discover anything or?
Yeah. Some less plank-like parts.
Some less plank-like parts. Did anybody else have this experience? Yeah. Some parts were not fully in plank as we realized. Yeah. And when we got the other person to help us, it's like we could shine a light into some parts that were otherwise in the shadows. Yeah? However, when we sound, let's just say R together. Where does the sound go? It kind of goes everywhere. Like with plank, Virabhadrasana, the warrior posture, interesting posture to do this exercise. If I've tried it, there's some parts of me are not really in the spirit of the warrior. Yeah, some parts can, because what is the weapon of the warrior? We will speak more about this probably tomorrow. We'll leave it. So you can contemplate that question tomorrow. But some parts of my warrior are not so illumined, let's say, a little bit left in the shadows. So in the plank, we notice some parts are they're in the shadowlands. I'm not so aware of them. Because that sound can reach into the unknown places without us having to make any specific effort. And so this is one of the many reasons why sound-based practices are so cherished. Because they can literally reach the parts that other techniques might not be able to reach so easily. So we have these basic elements, and we can work with them in connection to our sense experiences. Now we come in this model of reality to this really wonderful section of the Indriyaha. Say Indriyaha.
Indriyaha.
What are the Indriyas, the Indriyaha? Okay. So yeah, one of the ways this one is described is the senses. Now, have you heard of Indra? Indra.
Indra.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
The king of?
gods.
The king of the gods. The king of heaven. In Indian mythology, Indra. Indriyaha. So Indra is the king of heaven. Indriyaha are the powers of Indra. These are also sometimes referred to as devataha, meaning divine powers. So the idea is, you have divine powers. Divine in the sense that they help you experience, they help you see, they help you feel, they help you have experiences. And these 10 indriyaha will come from the top here. So we have the Gyan Indriyaha, say Gyan Indriyaha. Jnana basically means knowing. So these are the knowing powers. Let's say them together. Shrotra, Tvak, Chakshu, Jihva, Grana. So these are the 5 senses that we're already familiar with, yeah? Hearing, touch, seeing, tasting and smelling. Yeah? Is it true that these indriya of the senses are powerful? How do we know they're powerful?
You smell something bad.
And what happens?
You react.
It has an impact, yeah?
It can be very physical even.
Very strong reactions. It can make us move away or move towards very quickly. Have you ever had the experience you're moving towards something, oh yeah, I'm going in this direction, and then somehow one of the senses pulls us in a different direction? Maybe multiple directions at once. How does that feel when we feel pulled in many different directions? Unsettling. It's yoga, yeah? Other than yoga. The opposite of yoga. So the senses have this opposite of yoga inducing potential. They have this disturbing potential. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is very clear about this. They say, that's just within their nature. But is it also not the case that the senses are wonderful powers? They can guide us to what is really nourishing. They can guide us to what is really going to help us feel more integrated and more balanced. Would you agree? And the idea is that these sense powers, they're endowed with so much intelligence. Just as the karmendriya are. So these next 5, let's say these together. Vak, Pani, Pada, Payu, Upasta. And these are the, let's say, the action powers or the doing powers. And these also, in the yogic system, are recognized as being divine gifts, divine powers. So Vak means speech and articulation and expression. So you notice I did this gesture, or maybe you didn't because you're looking down. I did this gesture. So there's the idea that the arms are an extension of this chakra, which is the chakra of expression. So Vak doesn't just mean speech. It's the whole realm of communication, the whole realm of expression. Is it not an amazing gift, the ability to communicate? And how many ways can we communicate? Lots of ways, yeah. Not just with words and language, but with the tone of the voice, with sound, with gesture, with movement. So Tvak is the whole of this realm, not just speech. Pani. What is Pani? Picking up and putting down. Grasping things. Now we can pick up and put down physical objects. What else can we pick up and put down? Ideas. Concepts. Beliefs. Yeah? So again, this is very important. Because there's the idea we may have picked up certain ideas that are limiting us. Just because we pick them up doesn't mean we can also put them down. Pada. What is pada? Literally it means foot, yeah? And it refers here to the whole realm of movement, locomotion. So as bipeds, our primary means of motion is walking, but pada means movement and locomotion. Now, think of Pani. So here basically we have these distinguishing characteristics of a human being. We have this higher linguistic capacity, Vak. We have the opposing thumbs. This is one of the things that has helped us arrive where we are at the top of the food chain, that we have really rather extensive manipulative capacities. What about locomotion? What's special about a human as a mover? If you think of any animal, in at least one or two realms of movement, they are all vastly superior to us. Now you think of an ant, it's so much stronger than us relative to the size of their body. Yeah? You see the beautiful kites and eagles. Can anybody here fly? Just for a meter or two, they can fly for huge distances. Yeah. Is anybody here a fast runner? Not particularly, but even if we can run fast for a human being, when we put ourselves next to a horse or a big cat, what's special about human locomotive capacities?
The lungs are detached from the musculature of the body.
Upright. So general, or yeah?
Is the generality, yeah? You put us in the water, and the seal makes us look like we can't swim. We can swim, but just nowhere near as well as a seal or a dolphin or a penguin. But you put the dolphin or the penguin or the seal on the land, and then, they can't even survive. We can swim, we can climb, we can fight, we can crawl, we can do everything just about. We're not very good compared to other animals at any type of movement except for long distance walking and long distance running. It's the only thing that we can do better than other animals. The only thing. But the thing we can do is broad spectrum movement. We can do lots of things to some small level of competence. Do we do these things? Have you crawled recently? Have you climbed recently? Have you swum recently? Maybe some of you have, but maybe many of us, we haven't. And so this is another thing, this is a divine gift, this is divine power.
I'm missing the flying part in my life.
Yeah.
More than the other parts.
But flying, I grew up playing basketball, so I think, you can fly small distances, like just a little bit. But there is a way that human beings Well, one way that human beings can fly, or can approximate flying, is on water, yeah? Surfing or sailing. It feels like, has anybody here tried surfing? The last time I tried surfing, I had a great instructor, and he pointed out that what often happens when a beginner surfer catches the wave, when they jump up, they do this. The arms go like this. And it's like the feet come in. He says he's sure, he hasn't checked it out, but he's sure it relates to this flying instinct. It's like when you catch the wave, it's like you take off. And the feet and the arms go up, it's like you spread the wings, and the feet come in. And he says all beginning students, they always do this. So he's convinced that it's part of the reptilian bird brain that's still here. But then when you learn to stay down, you can actually feel like you're flying. And I have friends who sail, and it's just like, you catch the wind and you can feel like you're flying. But interestingly, surfing and sailing, they also use a lot of manipulative, and Pani and Pada get used a lot in those activities. If you live in a landlocked place like Mysore, not so much opportunity to practice those things. But the idea is wherever we are, we can move in ways that we maybe are not so familiar with. Which brings us to the next two powers, which are actually my favourite ones, I think. Payu and Upasta. Now what does Payu mean? Here it says excretion, it's the eliminative capacity, and Upasta it says procreation. But that's just the start of these two powers. Payu is our capacity to leave things behind, to excrete, to eliminate, to let things go. And Upasta isn't just about the propagation of the human species. It's not just procreation. It's the whole creative capacity, including recreation. Is anybody here a French speaker? No problem. I know we have some Spanish speakers in the room. What is the name of the most important period in the school day in Spanish?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
The most important moment or period of the school day. Very good. El recreo, known in French as la récréation. Say it in French. La récréation. In Italian, la recreazione. In Spanish, el recreo. In English, how is this known?
Recreation. Recess.
Playtime.
Playtime. Playtime, yeah. In the recreation, recreo is playtime. Has anybody walked past a children's playground when the children are playing recently? What did you see, Alexia?
Chaos.
Chaos. What else?
All kinds of
Smiles.
movement.
Smiles.
All kinds of moving.
All kinds of movement. Did you see invention? Creativity.
Yeah.
Kids are trying out new things here. They're moving in ways they've never moved before. And anytime you move in a way you never have before, what happens inside your physiology? New synaptic connections get made. So when you play, when you move in a way that is not your habit, you actually invite youthfulness. You can foster neurogenesis. You can create new brain cells. Would you like to create some new brain cells now? Let us stand up. So we're going to do a little exercise. Now I hope, let's rotate the fingers. Have you done this before? Yeah. So just try it. How does it feel? Familiar. Easy. We can all do it. Now, maybe this might feel slightly different. We're going to fix our elbow against our body. So the elbow's fixed in space. We're going to fix our fingers against the other palm. And now we're going to rotate the wrist. Very good. Try the other one. And now we rotate the wrist. The fingers don't move. The wrist moves. Like it's moving around a ball. It's working, yeah? That sound, did you hear the sound? That is the sound of neurogenesis. When you don't, like, some people have done this before, but notice this one. This is an open kinetic chain. We've all done it before, I think. This is a closed kinetic chain. And it feels quite different in the wrist joint. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it easy?
No.
No, good. So when it's not easy, then it can foster neurogenesis. It can foster recreation. Now my body is doing something it wasn't able to, it didn't know it could do. And now I'm reminding it of a capacity that it has. So this is generating a more, let's say, complete connectivity through the neurology and the physiology. Does that make sense? So this is a great yoga practice to do things you can't do. Now the elbow. Move the elbow in a circle. Like you've got a ball here. And the shoulder's not moving, the wrist's not moving, but the elbow's moving around the circle. Is anybody feeling? Yes? No? Yeah?
You do it without moving the shoulder.
The shoulder's going to move a little bit, but you want to minimize the shoulder and wrist movement. Okay? Now, we'll take the stance a little bit wider, we'll bend the knees. Does anybody here practice belly dancing? Excellent. So now, we're going to, just to start, let's bend the knees. And minimizing the movement in the ankles and the hips, can you make a rotation, like a circular motion in the knees? So as like the hips, they'll move a little bit, but can you minimize it? And can you make the knees make a little circle? It doesn't have to be a big movement. Can everybody feel that? Now we'll come up, and now we're going to move the pelvis in a circle. It's not like a hula hooping, more subtle, like just the pelvis. Circling one way, and then the other. Okay. Now, place the fingers on the hip flexors. Now the belly button is the center of our circle. So now, move the belly button in a circle.
With the spine as well, or only the belly?
The spine will definitely move.
That's advanced belly dance.
Now, is anybody feeling? Yes, no? Yes? Yes. Excellent. So this, like, there's a movement teacher who I spent some time with called Ido Portal. I really recommend his work. And he says you need to do things that you can't do at least once a week to be healthy. And every day to be really healthy. Because when you do things you can't do, it creates this greater activation in the system. So we could do like the ribs as well, for example, in one way, or the sternum. So to begin with, you could just take, we'll take the sternum as an example. You could start off, place your index finger on your sternum, and then use the muscles close to the spine to draw the sternum back, so you create a gap. And then bring the sternum so it presses into the finger and away, and forwards into the finger and away. And now come to the center. Now slide the sternum so the sternum is to the right of your index finger and then the other side. So the finger doesn't move, but the sternum slides to one side and the other. Like the finger's a pillar, and then you're doing this, looking around the pillar. Yeah? And then you can start to put those movements together. For example. So there's this very simple exercise. Now, if you do this, if you encounter an exercise and you can't do it, how do you feel as an adult in modern society?
Inadequate.
You know, we feel, oh, what a terrible adult, I'm supposed to be an adult, I'm supposed to have it worked out, yes? But how are we trained to respond in yoga when we meet something we cannot do? I will do the gesture. This is how yoga invites us to respond when we discover something that is not completely integrated. You can repeat the gesture with me. Try. And what is the gesture?
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm and celebration. Because now I've noticed, and as soon as I notice, I'm empowered to do something about it. As soon as I notice, I have a capacity to move my spine, but maybe I'm not attuned to it as much as I could be. Let me patiently now start to explore it. And this is a very empowering thing, because now we can start to be a little bit more aware of this reality that I'm experiencing through. So, Yogasana has many wonderful gifts, but if we do the same things all the time, there's a certain aspect of our locomotor capacity that might not be getting nourished. So if we have a job that we stay in the same position, whether it's sitting like in an office or if you do a certain type of physical work and you do the same things again and again and again, what happens? Injury. Something gets out of balance. So even though Yogasana is specifically designed to foster balance, if we don't do other things as well, we can maybe not activate the whole field as completely as, let's say, nourishingly as we might be able to. Does that make sense? So one thing I recommend is to do types of movement that you can't do as a practice. Like regularly, just to do something. So you can give yourself a little challenge. There's all sorts of things, like do you know this movement with where you've got the cups in the hands? Yeah? So do this at the same time as you're doing a dance step, or give yourself puzzles, give yourself challenges. We can look at this more as the week goes on. So basically, we have a recreational capacity, and we have the capacity to leave behind things that no longer serve us. So from the point of view of yoga, this is really important, because just because it's been a certain way up to now, doesn't mean that it has to continue like that. When we engage, all right, my spine is a bit locked, but I've noticed it's locked, I'm empowered. So the first teaching in yoga, I mentioned this last week as well. What's the first teaching in the Bhagavad Gita? It's the first imperative verb in the Gita is pasha, and pasha means look. Yeah? So yoga practice is basically looking, observing. So I think I mentioned this last week, but when I mentioned earlier this idea of Yogasana is a kindergarten practice, it's a foundational practice. When I was in the English equivalent of kindergarten, known as the infant school, I was taught a very important life skill, which was called in England the Green Cross Code. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
What is it, Paul?
Look, watch, listen.
Stop, look, listen. There's how to cross the road, because the road has got these dangerous things, yeah? So before you cross the road, you have to stop, look, and listen. This is the basic recipe for yoga practice. First imperative verb in the Gita, look. First imperative verb in the Aditya Hridayam, this hymn of instruction in the Ramayana, is shrinu. Can you guess what shrinu means?
Listen.
Listen. And when does the teaching come to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita? When he stops. So stop, look, listen. So when we stop, look and listen, we can empower ourselves to harness these miraculous gifts of Payu and Upasta, we can consciously leave things that no longer serve us and invite ways that are more and more conducive to integration. Does that make sense? So the idea is you are a miraculous divine being. Now, we mentioned that these are known as the Indriyaha because they belong to Indra, the king of heaven. These three at the top, you'll notice that I didn't put any translation. That's intentional because any translation, there's an important thing to mention is that this week we're going to come across quite a few Sanskrit words and terms. Often, when we translate a word from Sanskrit into another language, we have to make a choice. And the word we choose often isn't able to communicate the same range of meaning as the original word. So, buddhi, ahankara, and manas, often you see them translated as things like intelligence, ego, and mind. Nothing wrong with those ideas, but they have slightly different reach than those words. So manas, what it literally means, these three together are called the antakarana, the internal instrument. So the idea is we are creatures who have awareness. And we experience our awareness through all of these 20 tattvas that we've already spoken about. These three, manas, ahankara, and buddhi, are the internal instruments of our awareness. So manas is that part of our awareness that links the input from the jnanendriyaha and the karmendriyaha to the internal system, at the processing, cognizing part of the mind. Ahankara, do you know this word? Aham. Farm. Aham. What does it mean?
Me?
Me. I mean, yeah. Kara. Do you know the word kara? Like maybe you do Surya Namaskara. What does kara mean? So kara is from the verb kra, which means to do or to make. So ahankara is the I maker. Sometimes people translate it as ego, but it's not exactly the same as the Jungian ego. So ahankara is that part of our awareness that differentiates ourselves as an individual. I'm here and I'm not there. This is my bottle, that is not my bottle. Yeah? So if I leave the room and I see this bottle on the floor, and I look back and I see it, manas links the input through my jnanendriya of chakshu, and then my ahankara says, oh, that is mine. Buddhi is the part of the awareness that helps us discern, recognize, make decisions, make distinctions. So the three together help me make the decision, oh, I need to go back and pick up my bottle before I leave. Does that make sense? So buddhi is the most refined part of the awareness that makes decisions. Ahankara is that part of the awareness that gives a sense of individuality. Or I'm here, not there. This is me, this is mine. That's not me, that's not mine. And manas is that part which links all the input of our external reality to our own experience. Does that make sense? So the idea is, if we want to invite yoga, we can work with these things very immediately. We don't have to go anywhere, we don't have to wait. Wherever we are, we're inhabiting space. The elements are here. Our capacities to notice through the powers of our senses, to work with these gifts of our action powers, they're always available to us. And so we don't need to go anywhere to practice yoga. We don't need even to do any particular technique. When we start to foster integration through all these different aspects, we're already cultivating yoga. Does that make sense? Now we come up to the top, we've got two other tattvas. Prakriti, which in the language of Patanjali, in the Yoga Sutra, is sometimes called drishta, which means that which is seen, that which is manifest. And we have Purusha. which is the seeing principle. So Purusha generally means consciousness, the awareness, and Prakriti, that which is seen, the objects of awareness. So the idea is, everything that we experience exists in consciousness, in a field of awareness. Would you agree? Yet if it wasn't in consciousness, how could it be experienced at all? So Prakriti is nature. What do we know about nature? None. Nature means that which is natted. For example, tu nacimiento. Yeah?
Yeah.
Nature is that which is born. Yeah? So nature means that which is born. What do we know about everything that's born? It's going to die. And in between it's going to live, and life means
Grow.
change and growth. Yeah? And we did this last week, but it's always worth doing this. What is life? Let's do this together with the left hand. Pulsation. It's expansion and contraction. And life is also, do this with the other hand at the same time. Switch hands. But what is the other hand doing? Cycling, yeah? So life is pulsation and life is cycles. Life is movement. Life is change. So the idea is all of these things, they're subject to change. They come and they go. But the idea is they exist in a consciousness that is always there. So the idea in yoga is, can we tune in to that consciousness that is allowing us to perceive? And then every experience can be a means to connect more thoroughly to our essence, to that subtlest, deepest part of ourselves that isn't subject to birth and death, this consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah? So, from the point of view of grounded reality, is this a helpful model? Can you work with this? Yes, ma'am.
Where did all this exactly come from?
So this is in the school of Indian philosophy called Sankhya. The evolution of reality is explained. And the idea is that it all came from oneness. Consciousness is there. So I am talking from the point of view of Shaivism, or let's say tantric schools of yoga. So what yoga does is it takes this Sankhya model and it builds on it. It takes it a little bit further. So we have words like Shiva and Shakti that are generally more or less equivalent to Purusha and Prakriti, but there's a significant distinction. And the distinction is that in Shiva and Shakti model, Shiva and Shakti are never really separate, even though they may appear as separate. Whereas the Purusha Prakriti model, some people say, really they're not separate. Other people say, well, they're always really separate. But from my point of view, it doesn't really matter, because from the point of view of my own experiences, right now, I do feel separation. But the idea that I'm part of this whole also kind of makes sense. In the Sankhya school of philosophy, there is this model of the evolution of the universe. We call it the universe, the one field. Now, when we came about, where did we come from? So Megan, I can say, where are you from? It's just any answer is right. Planet Earth, okay, yeah. Planet Earth, good answer. Annie, where are you from?
I don't know, say I'm from Scotland.
Scotland, very good. Emil, where are you from?
I'm from my mom, I guess.
From my mom, yeah. So there's so many ways to answer the same question, yeah? So, generally speaking in the world, if you meet somebody and say, where are you from? What did they expect you to say?
No place.
A place, yeah. A place on the earth. But
Good country.
Which country? Yeah, in India. So which country? You've been asked this question? But as Emil says, we could say we all come from the same place. Because we all came from our mother's womb. Yes? And this is very significant. Because what is the mother's womb? Is it not the archetypal comfort zone? Do you remember what it was like?
Well, maybe
Jog your memory. It was very familiar. Yes? Warm, constant steady temperature, the ideal temperature, the perfect temperature. Constant food supply, giving us all the nutrients we need. Lovely, gentle, familiar, beating percussion to the days. And it's all we've ever known. So it's deeply familiar. So you could say it's the archetypal comfort zone. But despite the fact that it's all we've ever known, what happens? Somehow, from deep inside, even though that's all we've ever known, there's this impulse. There must be something more. And it starts to feel a little bit constricted. And then we do something truly heroic. We force ourselves into a space of greater constriction. And then we work our way to burst out into the breathing world. Yes? And then what do? We breathe in. And then what do? We breathe out, perhaps with sound. And then, basically, we are initiated into yoga practice. We are already initiated into the path of spiritual warriorhood. Because the action of birth was already this transition from a place of known familiarity into a much vaster unknown. And this is yoga practice. To look, how can I expand into something a little bit vaster? Because we could say we all come from the same place, which is our mother's womb. But before we even grew in the womb, where did we come from?
From the stars.
From the stars, yes. But in between the stars and the womb, just before the womb, there was a union. We came from a union. And when there was the fertilization of the egg, what was the first cell to form in the womb? What was the first cell of us to form? Was the heart. Yeah? And from that first heart cell, unity, oneness, wholeness, multiplication happened. And then asymmetry began. And the whole realm of diversity and asymmetry was born. But the source was oneness and unity. And the idea is that in the heart of every cell, we know what unity is. And so in yoga, we do not have to be anything that we are not. All we need to do is allow ourselves to be what we already know how to be, which is a cohesive whole. And so in yoga, we don't have to be anything we're not, we don't have to go anywhere we are not. Everything we need is already here. So as we actually come in the Indian system, as we come from unity. And it's actually our destiny to return to that unity. And the idea in yoga is, well, let me do something to expedite that return. Never mind waiting for one birth sooner or later. I would like to experience wholeness. Well, why not now? Yes? So this is the idea in yoga. Now this wholeness that is who we really are, it gets described in different ways in the yoga system. There are two ways that I would like to share today. And they both have three aspects. And one of these is Sat, say Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Have you heard this before?
Satchitananda.
Yeah. So, but it's actually Ananda. So, not Ananda. We'll come to that in a moment. But what is Sat? So this is the idea in the Upanishads. This is one of the ways that our essence, who we really are, is defined. So the idea is that you are Sat. Now Sat, what does it mean?
Balanced, or like he's even.
Even, yeah. Sat is from the verb us. Can anybody guess what the verb us means? If anybody speaks Latin or Italian. Us, essere in Italian. Us is the verb to be. So sat means being, existing. Often it gets translated as truth. But the idea is it's true in the sense that it exists, is real. So far, can we accept this definition? Okay, I am, yeah. Do we ever have the experience, I am not? Fleetingly we might think it, but as soon as we notice it, well, I'm actually having an experience, and I must be here to have the experience, yeah?
I was saying that women experience that every month. Before the period.
Okay.
We are not.
I mentioned this last week.
You're having the experience.
Yes, you're having the experience that you're not, so you actually are.
Isn't that kind of meditation? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the little thing we sometimes grasp.
Yeah, but the idea is we are. Would you agree?
Yes.
So as such. Now, chit. Yes.
I don't know. If we are learning that everything is changing all the time,
Yeah.
and we have to let go of everything because everything is changing all the time, we are not being all the time because we are changing all the time.
So the idea is that the reality, nature, manifest existence is always changing. But the essence that allows us to experience all of this, that is the part that is beyond the cycles, that is beyond the coming and going, that is, you might say, deathless or immortal. So the idea is in yoga to unify with that part of ourselves, and then we have no more fear. And when we have no more fear, we can live wholly in the present moment. And then we can really enjoy life even as it's going away.
But even if your present moment is different than my present moment, and if
Yeah.
she's from the planet Earth and she's from the mom, and she, you know, like every present and every reality and every being in this moment is totally different than your moment in this moment. Make sense?
Yeah, so the idea is all this difference is possible because of the vastness of consciousness. But the idea is when we become more attuned to our conscious essence, then we're less disturbed by the comings and goings. So we mentioned as well this question of when does yoga happen? So they say in the Vedic literature that when you're a human being, it's altogether normal that you will experience lovely things. You experience the joy of a beautiful sunset, or tasting the fruit straight from the tree when it's perfectly ripe, or close connection with people that you care about. But what else do we experience when we're human beings? We also experience loss and grief and hardship and bitterness, as well as this sweetness and this lovely stuff. This is normal. And so they say that when you're a human being and you experience all these comings and goings, it's altogether natural and normal that you have the idea there must be something more than all this coming and going. And so then we start to investigate, well, where am I in this? Who am I really? What's it all for? And is there not something beyond all this coming and going? And so then the idea is then we get kind of encouraged to stop, look and listen. Because generally what happens, even before we get very old, we have a few moments of yoga, or deep presence. Somehow we stop, we look and we listen. It might be some sensory experience. Something just strikes, it's so beautiful. Might be doing something. And it's something we're really enthusiastic about. We're really into it. And like everything else falls away. And we just experience this state of complete flow. And then it goes. We think, well, where did that come from? And so we get prompted to investigate, well, where is that? How can I experience that? And so we recognize that all these comings and goings, they're inevitable. But what is it that is experiencing all these comings and goings? What is my essence? Because we can look at the things that come and go, and then we say, well, who is it that's experiencing all these comings and goings? There seems to be some constant quality or presence that is the experiencer. And so in the yoga system and in the Upanishads, in the Indian system in general, there's the idea that the experiencer is really very hard to describe or define, because it's essentially not limited in the way that the things that are manifest are limited. And so what we're going to see now is these two definitions, which each have three aspects, that are ways to describe the indescribable essence. And this first way is Satchit Ananda. So Sat is the sense, well, it's real. You're existing. And we all agree that stands. Yeah, I'm here, I'm having an experience. Yeah? And Chit, conscious. I'm only having an experience because I have consciousness. Would you agree? So far, this definition of our essence, it holds good. Yeah? We can accept it. I'm here, I'm having an experience. I'm only having an experience because I'm conscious. Yeah? The third part of the definition is Ananda. Say Ananda.
Ananda.
Now Ananda is a very beautiful word. Say Nanda.
Nanda.
Ananda.
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 So Nanda means joy. It also means child. The idea is if you have a child, the child is your joy. Ananda means less than joy, other than joy, joyless, different from joy, almost joy but not quite. It has all these ideas, yeah? But Ananda is a joy that is always and only ever full.
Long A. Long A.
Yeah, long A, so like Ananda. So sometimes this gets translated as bliss. So Sat, I'm real, I'm here, I am. Okay, Chit, yes, I'm conscious, I have to be conscious to have an experience. I can accept these two first stages of the definition. Would you agree? Do you experience life as an uninterrupted, unadulterated chain of blissfulness? No, neither do I. So now, do we reject this definition? Do we throw it out the window? The Upanishadic master was deluded when he wrote this down. What do you think?
Instead, maybe look at it as a light, a goal.
Definitely. But the way I've come to think about this is also, what happens if you experience, even for a moment, your thought and your word and your action are all unified? How does that feel? Good. I would hazard to say we can use a stronger adjective than good. Yeah? How does it feel when what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing is completely together, it's completely one?
Bliss.
It feels blissful. It feels wonderful, yeah? Would you agree? Have you had a few moments like this in your life where you just feel completely together and you're fully into whatever you're doing?
Absolutely.
Feels great, yeah? Now when you have this wonderful, blissful feeling, because everything is kind of all on the same page, all connected, all gathered, working together. That blissful feeling, is it accompanied by the thought, what is this strange feeling of wellness? No, maybe afterwards, but in the moment it's just, oh, how does it feel? It feels familiar, yeah? Would you agree to say that it feels almost like home? So the idea that Ananda is not something foreign or alien to us, that actually this is inside us all the time. The wholeness is already here. It's just our ideas that are veiling it. And so there's the idea that the practice of yoga is the cultivation of this harmony, this balance, this integration, that helps us stay more attuned to that wholeness that's already here. So Sat Chit Ananda, what do you think? Is it acceptable as a working definition of our essence?
Yeah. It's like this idea that we know everything and we are not here to learn, we are just here to remember.
To remember. Yoga is a recovery project. Yoga is about remembering and recognizing. These are members of the group of our being. So yoga is about remembering, gathering them all together so they can function as a cohesive group, as a harmonic gang, you might say. Now another definition in the Upanishads of our essence, with three parts, is Satya, say Satya, Rita, Brihat. Now Satya, what does Satya mean? We had Sat already, yes, same. Satya, truthfulness, true in the sense, I am, I'm real, I'm existing. So this one we already know. What does Rita mean? Rita is a very hard word to translate, but there's an English word that's derived from it that gives us a big clue to what it means.
Rhythm.
Rhythm, yeah? The idea is that everything that is in existence is pulsating. And we are pulsating. The idea is, and then Brihat. Brihat means vast. Vast. Do you know this word vast?
Master.
Okay. So when I was in Kashmir, one of the seniors there, he would use this word. You have to be vast. And there's when we practice Satya and Rita, when we bring so much presence to what we are doing, that we can actually be in rhythm, we can actually be in balance, we can actually be in harmony, then we can actually perceive and recognize and remember the vastness we really are. So yoga is never about confining or limiting or trying to control. It's about harnessing the deep power of this miraculous system so we can actually experience the reality of the vastness that we really are. Is that clear? Yeah?
Can you incorporate the pulsating again?
So the idea is that everything in reality has a frequency, you might say. Have you heard this Sanskrit word dharma? So dharma is a word that we will look at more closely as the week goes on. Dharma has two principal meanings, well, has many meanings, but as a verb it means that which supports. As a noun, it refers to the essential characteristic or quality of a thing. So the idea is when we learn to be in rhythm, when we do our dharma, we can start to be in balance with the universe. Because the universe is also pulsating. Now when you look at a natural environment, natural in quotation marks, you see how the rhythm of nature has this beautiful sustainability to it. Like you think of the turning of the seasons. The winter supports the spring. and the summer and the autumn. Each one supports the other part of the cycle. You mentioned earlier about your cycle, yeah? And the idea is that as a woman, they say in the Kashmiri Shaiva yoga system that a woman is much more advanced than a man. If a man and a woman are both on fire spiritually, the woman can achieve in a week what the man can in a year. Because the female physiology already contains a much more activated upasta. The creative capacity is much stronger because of the capacity to cradle this new life within you. And the moon cycle, men have it too, but to a less pronounced degree. But when you're a woman, it's like the flow, the pulsation of nature is unavoidable. She comes and slaps you very clearly every month. So you have to pay attention to a greater degree than a man can. A man can get away with paying less attention. So can a woman get away with it, but do we want to get away with it? Or do we want to actually live more attentively so we can actually be in rhythm and feel an easefulness through all the cycle? And so the lesson is that we are pulsating beings. One of the very dangerous ideas or pernicious ideas of the times we live in is that growth is constant. Yeah? In the economic model, growth always on the up. The problem in the world is we have economy without ecology. Management of the ecos, the resources, without understanding of the resources. The resources are part of nature. Nature is pulsating. It is cycling. And so yoga is about learning to be in balance through the pulsations, through the cycles. It says that even as we have this ever-present consciousness, this satya, this reality, we experience that through a pulsating reality. So the idea in yoga is we don't try and escape manifest reality. This is the arena of practice. This is the divine vehicle. We don't try and escape bodily reality. We work with it. So when we come into deep rhythm, in deep harmony here, then we can see that this too is part of this vastness that contains it all. So I really love this Satya Rita Brihat definition. Satya is, okay, that undying, deathless, constant presence of consciousness. Rita, that exists as part of this changing reality. It's the idea is that nature is not separate from consciousness, it is existing within it. And so we have to dance with it, we have to work and play with it. And so in yoga, we do not deny reality. Rather, we engage with it. And if you want to dance with another person, you have to engage with that person. If you want to come into rhythm with nature, we have to engage with it. So we have to stop, look and listen. Stop and check. Am I running on autopilot? Or am I allowing myself enough space to stay more sensitive to the need to modify the way I'm engaging in order to stay in balance as the cycle changes? So, yes, Megan?
Why do you think yoga is often defined as like mind control, controlling mind? It's like, I never liked that definition.
I'm very pleased to hear you didn't like that definition. Neither do I. I've contemplated this, and the thing I've come to is that we live in a tyranny of the mind. We're so conditioned to champion the mind that we think it's all about the mind. And this goes back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am. What a stupid idea. No, I am, therefore I am. What about I move, therefore I am? What about I feel, I smell, therefore I am? This is like, smell is a much more visceral experience than having a thought. Moving is a more visceral experience than having a thought. But somehow, in the European academic tradition and intellectual tradition, thought and mental activity got elevated to this high position. And the situation that we've grown up in, I went to a school where thinking is championed. Being a good thinker, great. Smelling, tasting, who cares? But this is the tragedy. This is why it's so important to work with them. When you look at animals in the wild, what do you notice? Or even if you look at street dogs in India, they live a kind of wild life. There's a dog that was born 2 or 3 years ago. It looks so healthy living in this street. It might not be the most ideal environment for a dog, you might think, but this dog looks as healthy as any dog I've ever seen. How does the dog find what to eat?
Doesn't think too much about it.
The idea is the indriya, these are divine powers. The idea is that the tongue, the skin, the eyes, the ears, they're endowed with a tremendous intelligence. And an animal in the wild, it's connected to that divine intelligence. Now what happened was that when I was growing up, do you know any human being who really knows how to eat? Like really got it dialed in and know exactly how to just eat what they need to be really well? No. But do you know any wild animal that doesn't? So what's the difference? In my case, I grew up in England, and my father, when he was a boy, didn't always have enough food. And his mother also, they didn't always have enough to eat. When I was growing up in the 1980s, do you remember Live Aid? There was a big famine in Africa. So this is how it was for me. Maybe this story is not so dissimilar for you. I go to school, I come home at 3:30, 4 o'clock. How am I?
Hungry.
Very hungry. I would even say I'm starving. You can probably tell from looking at my physiology, my metabolism is on the faster side of the spectrum. Come home from school, I'm very hungry. What do? I seek food. What does the beloved elder do? Could be mum, could be dad, could be, well, it wasn't them actually, could be beloved grandparent. What do they say? Don't eat now, son. You'll spoil your appetite. Yeah? And then 2 hours later, dinner is served. By which time, young child's digestive fire has gone out. It's burnt itself out. Now, there you are, 7 years old. You know you want to eat, but now it's your beloved grandpa. And what you really want to say is, no, grandpa, I won't spoil my appetite. I have a 7-year-old metabolism. It's very fast. If you just let me have a biscuit now, it will be completely incinerated at least 30 minutes before dinner. I will be hungry again. You don't need to worry about that. I am starving. The digestive fire is ready to receive an offering. But you're 7, so you just think, oh, well, grandpa is so lovely, he must be right. Then it comes dinner time, and what do? The elders, what do they put on your plate? Here you are, little 7-year-old. They pile a huge amount of food, because when they were grown up, they didn't have enough. Eat up, son, it'll make you big and strong and clever and healthy and happy and all the rest of it. And then when you can't finish it, what do they say to you?
You weren't that hungry.
No, you weren't that hungry before, were you? Or they say, eat up now, there's starving children in Africa. Or they say, no dessert for you. This type of thing. Did it happen to you?
Yes.
Something similar. How many times did this happen before you were even 10 years old? Your intuition, your deep intuitive knowing, the power of the intelligence of your senses told you to do something. Maybe it was to eat, maybe it was to go to the toilet, maybe it was to stop and sleep, maybe it was to go and run around frantically. But what did the elders say? No. Hundreds and thousands of times before you were even 10 years old, the voice of our intuitive wisdom was stamped down because of mental ideas. Because the adults, they also got the same thing happened to them. But somehow, since the era of mechanization at least, in an industrial society where we're less connected to natural rhythm, we've got this idea that having the ideas and trying to control nature, and you do it in a certain way at a certain time, makes things work. But we're not a mechanistic system. So I think it's because we're living in this tyranny of the mind. We've lost contact with the deep power of the collective system. All these gang members need to be rehabilitated. So somebody comes to yoga and they look at it through this lens of I think, therefore I am. So yoga is mind control. And we see, for example, translations of Patanjali's definition of yoga, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, as stopping the mind. Can you guess what I think of that definition, or that translation of Patanjali?
Yes.
Yes. I'm not particularly a fan of it. Yeah? We will look at that definition tomorrow, and we will also look at that definition through the lens of mythology. Because chitta, see what I put here, chitta is the whole, chit is consciousness, yeah? Chitta is that which is conscienced, is that which is experienced. So chit is the experiencer, chitta is that which is experienced. So the whole realm of experience. So for me, yoga's mind control is very much a reduction. It's a narrowing and a making small of what it really means. But I think it's come about because in our society we've put an imbalanced value on thinking. And yoga is about bringing it all into balance. Does that answer the question? Yeah? I could talk about it longer, but I'm conscious that I've already exceeded the advertised closing time. Does anybody have any other questions? Many, that's good, because we have a week. So the intention of this week is, I've taught in Mysore many courses on Yoga Sutra or Bhagavad Gita, and I love doing that. But what the intention this week is to we'll get a kind of foundation, so that if we go off in our own studies and we read Ramayana, we read Gita, hopefully having spent this time this week, then that miracle mirror text can be even more practically useful. So today we have looked at this basic Sankhya model that yoga takes for granted. So the Gita and the Yoga Sutras, they take this for granted, they were familiar with this, more or less. So having got familiar with this to some degree, tomorrow we will look a little bit about classical definitions of yoga in the Yoga Sutra and in the Bhagavad Gita and through the lens of mythology. And tomorrow is Martes, yes? Martes is the day of Mars. And who is Mars? He's a warrior, yeah? Okay. Yeah. So, we might not quite get to this, but I think tomorrow we will also, having looked at those definitions, we will also get into the archetype of warriorhood, which relates to the field. Because the word kshetra is related to the Sanskrit word kshatriya. Say kshatriya. And kshatriya is a word for the protector of the field. But it's also a word for warrior. So the word warrior, it has certain connotations. But tomorrow we'll look at the yogic meaning of that archetype, and also the archetype of the sovereign. And warrior and sovereign are a little bit, I think, problematic, because if we look out at the world, we don't see many examples of mature warriors and mature sovereigns. But in the yogic system, these archetypes are used a lot, so we'll look at what they really mean from a practical point of view. Okay? And what was the thing I said to contemplate for tomorrow? Do you remember? What is the weapon of the yogic warrior? To just think about, what is that? What is the weapon of the yogic warrior? Okay.
It's not the danda.
Not the danda. But who knows? There's many. Well, I'm sure we'll have more than one right answer.
I appreciate the analogy of the danda as not just being a staff, but a stick that we fight off ignorance.
Yeah.
So just had to throw it out there and see.
Okay. Any questions? So we'll continue tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Yeah? Shall we sing a mantra to close? Yeah? So we'll sing the Om together. Close it Om, Shanti 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 Om. Om.